Welcome to the Ninja John podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. This is a bi-weekly podcast where my friend Jess O'Brien and I discuss internal martial arts and Qigong and meditation. This week we continue our discussion of the Marcus Brinkman interview from the JAMA in 1999. In this one we talk about the concept of pre-heaven and post-heaven and their connection to Xingyi and Bagua. Then we discuss the concepts of pulling silk and silk reeling and how they relate to Baguazhang and the internal connections versus external movements. Then in the Patreon, we continue our discussion of sweet potato at Hung Yishang School, and Hung has more advice for Bruce on how to develop his internal practices rather than just adding more techniques to it. Which gets into a discussion of having one teacher and sticking with them or having many teachers and shopping around. So I also go into a little bit of a rant in the Patreon, so you can listen to that as well. All right, take care of yourselves. Thanks for listening and be well.
In today's episode, we're going to return to a discussion of Chinese martial arts with Marcus Brinkman, discussing the internal martial arts of Taiwan from Journal of Asian Martial Arts, number 2, volume 8. Where we left off, we'd been talking about Master Hung Yishang of Taiwan, and now we've come up to the next part of the segment of the interview. So the interviewer asks, I've heard that Hung Yishang had developed dragon body. What does this mean? And dragon body is a concept used in internal martial arts frequently. So Marcus says this: the characteristic spinal waves associated with Wulong Baiwei, Black Dragon Shakes Its Tail, possess a spiraling or serpentine quality. Wulong Baiwei integrates the larger spirals of Bagua's mother palms into one essential action, Chanse, reeling silk. The spiraling of the 8 mother palms generally appears in larger configurations. Within Wulong Baiwei, however, the spiraling is accentuated through the trunk and is rather compact, hence its undulating dragon body appearance. In Bagua circles, dragon body is something that comes up, and it seems like each school has their own sort of definition of it. And here he talks about Wulong Baiwei, which is the Black Dragon Shakes Its Tail, is the composite form in Gao style Bagua, where after you've learned all the palm changes, it's kind of this final multi-part long palm change that's very twisty and very windy and very goes tight in turns, and you're really twisting and moving your spine a whole lot, more so than any of the rest of the training. And he says, so you take the spiraling and you make it more compact and accentuated through the trunk. So it's like the way Marcus is describing it, it's using the spine and the torso to really emphasize that wrapping and twisting, which that makes sense to me. That's definitely one of the ways to describe dragon body.
Yeah, I've heard it more as being able to separate the different pieces of your body. So I guess that's kind of the same thing, but
yeah. Well, how did you learn it? What is it?
It's being able to like turn your hips one way, your belly another, and your shoulders another, and to get that sense of like coiling in your torso, right? So,
and he's calling it undulating.
Yeah, it has that quality too. But yeah, generally this is not like something you do in the beginning because
this is advanced for sure.
But like in Bruce's system, that starts with like the 5th palm change. You start going back and forth, and then by the 8th you're doing the full on dragon body thing.
Yeah, it's at the end of Gao style as well, so that makes sense that this would be sort of the highest level of the.
Well, it's stages, right? Wow. I mean, it's like you're always doing the quote dragon body, but there's a progression from being a sort of unified thing, more like a Xingyi type of structure, to having this again this undulating quality, like think of it's like a snake or an alligator or something,
or
right?
Dragon.
It's that. Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, the way not a dragon, an alligator or crocodile will. Do they do that roll thing?
Spin over kind of, yeah.
Right? That's kind of that where it's
overturning.
Spinning their whole body to whip around, right? It's that kind of same. I think that's where it comes from.
Yeah, no, it's about as close as they get. Lizards and crocodiles and stuff. I guess, and as Cheng Tinghua style is always associated with this dragon shape. And I think, the various Cheng styles are known for the more liquefied type of fluidity, whereas Yin Fu, obviously some of them have it too, but some of them are also sort of a little more harder and stiffer looking anyways, where there's a
Well,
little harsher edge to their action than that liquefied thing.
I mean, some of it is that it's that wrestling Sui Jiao piece, right? There's a lot of that twisting, type
To
of
do
stuff.
big throws, you got to twist your torso against your leg movement going the other way, maybe sort of opposite action.
So there's, it incorporates some of that.
So he goes on to go a little more about it. So he goes, Dragon Body links the inside and outside of the body. So that movement is both internally and externally circular. Conceptually, this involves jings, known as Chansi Jing, reeling silk, and Chuosu Jing, drawing silk. The two represent a dialectical relationship of external and internal. In this context, drawing silk is the internal context. The internal component. So that's interesting. He frames Chansujin and Chosujin as the outside of the body and the inside of the body, and applies it to Bagua, because normally those terms are associated with Tai Chi. But I could see how that could work for especially this type of movement in Bagua as well.
The thing you do to like link, that's the twisty one. And then when you move and you do those big coiling motions with your arm, that's the external one. So Bruce uses the term pulling silk, right? That's the linear connection in a sense. That's the keeping that internal cohesion thing where your arms are connected to your spine. That's the thing you get from the rise drill over turn and fall of Xingyi kind of. And the other part is the big circle, the external circles, right? The bird type motions that you have in Tai Chi, for example. That's where they use that. Right? So in Tai Chi, the reeling silk you see more in the Chen style, and the pulling silk you see more in the Wu style and in the Yang style, right? It's like that more linear versus with the big external circles, right? So in the smaller stuff, you keep those circles inside your body essentially, and you don't let them come out as big.
And so in this case, he's saying you combine both basically for this dragon body, as you're both internally and externally. And in typical Bagua fashion, you're doing it everything to the extreme, right? You're twisting and reaching and stretching just beyond normal.
You're always doing both of these. It's just how much you do of which one, right? So when you ramp it up and you really start to do more of the coiling, that's what he's talking about, is where you really see the just external coiling of the body and stuff. I mean, this is what makes Bagua look so cool, is it's got that.
What use is this dragon body type of action when it comes to martial arts? Like Xingyi and Bagua both have a lot of structure and stability, and the momentum of moving around the circle are enough to clobber somebody pretty well. And the circling actions are also already built into Bagua on every level. Why take it to this? What's so great about taking it to this dragon body level besides for performance purposes?
I mean, it has a lot of purposes, but one of them is grappling, right? Like if somebody tries to grab you in Bagua, there's a assumption of fighting multiple attackers when you start doing the circle stuff. So the closer, tighter, twisty stuff is if someone tries to grab you, for example, that's where you would use it, because it's like hard to hold on to a
alligator.
Yeah, if you grab an alligator, right, it's gonna whip you around, right? So
whereas striking from a distance, you can use structure and power and momentum. But when somebody gets real close, like body to body, then you got to use that body twisting and turning.
With multiple attackers, there's times where you can't help, but someone's going to bump up against you, or you're going to have your back on someone or your shoulder on someone. And that's a place where you can use, essentially it's to get like where you can use your shoulders, your hips, and all these other parts of your body, not just your hands, as places to strike with.
And to create some space and like open up. Well, if you're locked up, and you can use that twisting and undulating to try and create a little distance to
basically
strike
it's harder to grab a moving thing essentially. So if that thing is wiggling and like a fish out of water kind of, right? That it's hard to grab it because it's not just stiff, it's kind of wiggly. And I think there's some of that. Yeah,
And alternately, offensively, it could also help you once you get a hold of somebody to wrap them up better. Just as much as it's good to escape, it's good to get a hold of somebody too.
It's used a lot to sort of wrap somebody up and use them as a shield, right? So they come at you, you spin them around, and then you can kind of choke them and push them into
control them better, basically, because you're more squishy and flexible, and that always helps pretty much, especially in close range.
Yeah, so it's also used in close range, like if somebody's trying to, get you with a short, body shot or something, right? That you can, as that thing starts to make contact, you can kind of wiggle your body out of the way. Like Wang Shijing did that one a lot, right? Where as the punch would hit his belly, he'd kind of make a circle with his belly and get out of the way and then come back with it and bounce you.
So Marcus then moves into another topic. Now, this is the idea of bone marrow washing, Shi Shuijing. And so what he says is that I would characterize Master Hong's training methods as the post-heaven aspect of bone marrow washing. This aspect deals largely with reparation and strengthening of the physical body, as well as essential movement patterns and principles. Hong's idea of achieving this involved routine standing sessions and repetitious practice of Xingyi's Wu Xing Quan, 5-element fists. For myself, I endured Hong's post-heaven training, but later I sought the expertise of Lo De Shu in regards to understanding the principles of pre-heaven. So it sounds like the post-heaven idea of bone marrow washing was taught by Master Hong through the use of standing and 5-element fists.
That's where a lot of that stuff he was talking about before with the twisting.
Twisting postures.
Yeah,
so it's unbearable.
And you twist in and out, and you do and eventually that twist gets deep enough that it's getting down to your bones,
flexing the bones and twisting the bones and stimulating the bone marrow.
Right. Well, you get the physical thing to go down to the surface of the bone, and then there's a shift that happens essentially, and then that's when you're going rather than going from outside to in, you're going from in to out. So it naturally progresses, I think, in one sense, that if you go in deep enough, you hit the thing that's going out, right? So
maybe that's the pre-heaven.
That's where the post-heaven turns into the pre-heaven, right?
Sure.
But you can also just start with the pre-heaven and go that route, which is it's like a little.
Yeah, there's inside to out and outside to in, and everybody's got their way.
I think it depends on your constitution. I think if you're starting from a place of fairly good structure, or you've done something like Tai Chi or Xingyi, or like a Shaolin type of thing, then it's pretty easy to. You don't need the post heaven stuff quite as much because you probably have some of that
already flexed your bones and twisted your bones a bunch already.
Yeah. And so it's conceivable that you could go in just directly into the pre-heaven stuff. But I think the post-heaven stuff tends to give people more of
give you that solid physical strength that you can't go wrong by getting a good structural basis before you do anything more esoteric.
It's got more movement, and it's got more. I mean, you can do it in for example, I did it in Xingyi, and I think Marcus is saying that mostly he did in Xingyi.
That's how Master Hong did it. Yeah,
that the 5 elements are really an excellent container for learning how to do that.
Yeah,
you could also use the straight line Gao style stuff, or you could use some other type of. Classically, it's some kind of standing and some kind of slow moving.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard so many different ways people go about this, and from Shaolin methods and stuff that who knows, sometimes they're talking about different things with the same words, but in this case, that resonates with me, that idea of getting
but if you're talking about
bone marrow active.
Well, if you're talking about Bagua, they're generally talking about doing things on the inside to do martial arts. So you can do the external fighting techniques first and then learn how to put something in it, which is that's what he's talking about, is you do that external training and you kind of get how to use Xingyi, if you will. And
Yeah.
in the process of learning how to do that, you're putting your body through this external, sort of internal training, which creates the structure for then, if you want to go deeper, you can do it. But
Definitely.
you have to develop a certain amount of yang essentially before you can go in and do the yin stuff. So
Yeah.
um Shingy makes less of a thing about the pre-heaven stuff.
Right. I mean, that's what Marx is saying here. He learned the post heaven in Xingyi, but he went to Lo to learn the pre heaven within Baguozhang. So he says, pre heaven Baguozhang, like bone marrow washing, is initially concerned with curbing excess energy expenditure of the nervous system. For instance, immoderation of the emotions is seen to tax the nervous system and consequently deplete the jing, the body's material basis, including endocrine secretions. As one learns to curb excess energy expenditures, the process is then refined. The mind seeks to quell energy expenditures at their inception and recycle energy before there is much loss. While energy conservation is the initial aim, advanced methods which strongly stimulate the nervous system to fuel endocrine secretion. Practitioners learn to funnel this rarefied substance back to the nervous system to replenish bodily substances such as marrow, spinal fluid, and brain matter. Pre-heaven Bagua is intended to reintegrate the nervous system towards a higher order of function and purpose. So that's definitely different from the idea of sort of squeezing the bone marrow. This is like you use your mind to stop, to like get your mind, your nervous system to be quieter and calmer so that it's not wasting energy, and so that it's sort of like storing the energy and then replenishing the endocrine and the spinal fluid and so on. I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, so the post heaven is the bone marrow stuff, but the pre heaven is more the brainwashing. And that seems like a much more subtle process, right? That's a much more the mind and the E and the Shin, the heart mind, those things have to start getting involved if you're going to start to replenish your body's internal hormonal substances. I mean, I think of this as being the heaven and earth training, right?
Mm, sort of. Pretty much everything I do is pre-heaven, right? I didn't accept this, maybe the Shingy Five Elements, but even before I did the Shingy Five Elements, I did a year of Shingy Santi, which that's the pre-heaven part of Santi, where you're
Of
not
Xingyi, yeah.
sorry, of Shingy, right? Where you're not working on techniques and
Right.
body stuff. You're working on standing and breathing and mind's training, right? It's like
Pre-heaven and post-heaven approaches are one way of looking at this. And then there's the idea of marrow washing and brain washing. And in Kumar's Negong program, that does take place in the heaven and earth style, where you're making the microcosmic and macrocosmic orbits, stretching the bones out and moving the marrow and stuff. And then the second half, the microcosmic, you wash the brain and move the energy up the spine, through the brain, down the front. So like this is a very particular process.
it's inside out, right? It's like you got to be able. It's you got to be able to do the Nagong first, then you do the
Right.
external movement. Where I mean, nobody does that. That's
No,
impossible, right?
but that's the general philosophy of the direction you're going.
That's what you're working towards. But I mean, the reality is you have to start with the body, right? It's just, what are you starting with? Are you starting with, can I move my intent through my arm as I stretch it and bend it and do my physical motion? Or do I just do the motion 10,000 times until I start to feel something else, right? That's kind of how I look at it. Is one
Yep.
is just you do a physical action endlessly. I mean, until it becomes internal, essentially.
That's why he talks about enduring Hung Shang's post-heaven approach of just endless grinding, slow motion training.
Well,
It's just
again, I don't
torture,
really think you can do pre-heaven without some
right?
post-heaven. I mean,
You won't have, I mean, maybe for meditation, but if you want to do martial arts, you better have some post-heaven. I mean, in theory, maybe Neigong and Neidan alone could regenerate all your glands and stuff inside to the point where you don't need much physical
Well,
exercise, I
my
suppose.
point
But
is the other going the other way, which is if
mm,
you're not healthy, fighting is not a shouldn't be a big concern of yours. Getting healthy should be a big concern, right? The idea
absolutely.
that you don't it's a idiotic thing to go to the point of I'm going to start using up the chi I have that's keeping me healthy to do
Mm,
martial arts, right? Like,
definitely.
but that is, that's what happens if you push the post heaven method too far. What ends up happening is it starts to eat your pre heaven, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'm not going to say which martial arts do it, at least not in the public version of the podcast, but there are martial arts that's what they're doing is their method is to pull and forcefully bring up the pre-heaven chi to make yourself stronger, right? To add it to your post-heaven stuff. But
Sort
what
of.
that ends
Yeah.
up doing is weakening you on a constitutional level. So you get really
You pay a price
strong,
for it.
you
Yeah.
pay a big price for it later on in life. You're not usually not, it takes a while. But this is like, a good example of this in the West is football players, right? They push themselves to the point that they got, nothing to keep themselves going. As soon as they stop training, it's done, right? Like that's the downside of the post heaven method is you kind of
Right.
have to keep it going.
Or a pro fighter who just you burn up something in the process of winning and making the money you can, but by the time you turn 35 or whatever, you
Yeah,
burned
I
out
mean,
some.
Olympic athletes are a great example. I mean, it's like where you're the gymnasts, that are like
Sure.
by the time they're 18, they're they look like
Trashed.
yeah, they're just done, and
Right.
it's
That's
that
the downside of just digging so deep and sacrificing so much to win now. But ideally, you'd look at more long term.
right. So the pre-heaven method kind of I think it was going for the idea of like more of a let's take the uh, longevity and health practices from Taoism, and let's incorporate some of that into our external movements so that we can do it longer, essentially, and not burn up that juice, and it's and beyond not burning it up, there are, if you do it long enough, you start to build those pre-heaven energies up
Mm.
again. So
Strengthen them. Yeah.
um, yeah, it can go even further.
So he goes on to the next obvious question, which is, does bone marrow washing aspect of pre-heaven Bagojong have any direct connection to martial arts? Marcus Brinkman says yes. A great deal of connection, especially if you consider the nervous system's role in the development of agility and power. This kind of collecting of energy is the aspect of pre-heaven Bagojong involving with redirecting bioenergy back to its source, regenerating the material basis of the nervous system. In theory, extending the mind's sensitivity inward puts the nervous system in contact with the material body. In martial practices such as Sansho, Rosho, or Tuisho, developing this kind of sensitivity is fundamental to cultivation of good tactile listening skills, tingjing. During this kind of training, the mind is directed inward, while listening skills direct the mind outward toward the surface of the body. From a modern Chinese medical standpoint, tactile nerve branches near the skin surface derive nourishment from core neural substances such as marrow, brain, and spinal cord. Development of good tingjing skills are therefore partly dependent on the cultivation and reparation of these materials. So yeah, if you're directing your mind deep inside and becoming very precise and very aware, that can't help but affect your sensitivity to touch and connection when you click with somebody else. So it could definitely give you an advantage.
Yeah, I mean it's that sort of thing of that's kind of like saying does working out make you a better boxer, right? Of course it does. I
Well,
mean,
that's obvious though, but this is more inner, right? Like this
right,
is
but I
what
mean
gives internal martial arts its edge, basically.
meaning what it is that what I'm saying is that like you're not going to be doing um consciously trying to do Neigong while you're doing, if you're fighting, right? But
Right.
in the practices like Rosho and push-ins, there's this emphasis, if you will, on intention and feeling that's why they're called soft hands, right? I mean,
finally he says, okay, so how do you connect post heaven to pre-heaven? So in here Marcus is talking about kind of what you were saying. He says Neijia Chuan in general typically progress from mind follows body to body follows mind. So that's going from outside to inside, or going from Hotian to Shentian. This process is ordinarily suggestive of methods which link the body and mind along their common neural pathways. Cultivation of mind is analogous to cultivation of sensitivity. Likewise, cultivation of body is analogous to cultivation of sensation. When sensation becomes abundant, the mind is better able to feel its movement. Hence, body follows mind. And as the mind becomes increasingly attuned to body sensation, it may begin to coordinate with its movement. This is the mind feeling itself. As awareness of the body's frequency becomes clear, one becomes increasingly able to integrate external body movement around this frequency. So like you were saying, you've got to have some of this post-heaven, some of this pre-heaven. You need to have the mind becoming aware of the body, and you've got to become the body aware of the mind signals. And again, that's the genius of internal martial art. Like they took it deeper and they went beyond just banging against the wall over and over to get tougher.
Yeah, so in martial arts, it's you have to feel what someone's doing to you and what you're doing to them, right? Like at the same time. So you have to be able to feel something external outside of yourself and something inside of yourself at the same time. So that's the quote unquote application of this, right? Is being able to sort of be in two places or more at once, right? That if you can have some part of your awareness stay inside of your body and feel where the other person's pressure is trying to land, you can move it then, and at the same time feel where they're stuck, right? You can do things to them. And it's that piece about the better you are at feeling your own internal awareness, and external awareness, the easier it is to do these things on someone else. So it's a chicken and egg sort of thing, that there's the more you can do one, it feeds the other, but you need to have both. Now it's not necessarily 50-50, right? It doesn't have to be even. You could be doing 70-30 in either direction, right? You could be mostly doing a physical thing with a little bit of internal awareness, or you could be doing a thing where you're mostly focused on internal awareness. But I think when you get into fighting, it's what we call intuition, but it's not intuition. It's an insane amount of training, right? But where you go from having to, at least for a millisecond, put some mind into doing something, to not having to do that, to where your body just kind of does something and you're there. And and this is where it's like, I think, again, that shift happens of, if you just think about doing Rosho over and over, at a certain point, you don't have to think about what your hands are doing. You can start to focus on your waist and your legs. And then at a certain point, you don't have to focus on your waist and legs, and you can start focusing on your spine. And then at a certain point, you can start focusing on your organs. And all the while, you're still able to do the external stuff. It's just your ability to hear what's going on has gotten better.
Yep. It's a process. And it comes slowly and surely, you got to keep going. And things that make sense don't always happen in the order that you want them to, and things that don't make sense sometimes suddenly make sense. So it's an art, as we've often said.
Yeah, it has to grow, I think,
organically, naturally. Yeah.
I think in one sense, trying to make a distinction between those type of things is more for the learning of it rather than the doing of it. That once you get it, either of them it starts to become obvious that it's both, right? That again, it's just two sides of the mountaintop. You're going to end up in the same place. It's just different paths.
Well, let's take a break from what Marcus is teaching and look back at the book Blurred Boundaries by Hong Zihan, talking about the history of Chinese martial arts in Taiwan. And again, Master Hung Yishang being the main topic of the book. And we've been looking at the chapters about BK Francis here and his experiences at Master Hong's dojo. Martial arts school from the viewpoint of Hong Zihan. And so where we left off, he says, Mr. K vowed to master all of this profound knowledge, to use weakness to overcome strength as his classmates did, and use skills to convince people. As a result, his absorption was like a dried sponge being placed back into the sea. As the scale of the gymnasium was large and there was a lot of people, there were many proficient fighters with whom to practice. This was tantamount to providing him with an ideal practice environment for combat. So he's entered the school, and now he's got this huge gym full of hundreds of people to fight, and he can't wait to start jumping in and absorb all this knowledge like a sponge in the sea. So we'll go to the Patreon now and continue the discussion there.
Hey folks, hope you enjoyed the episode. You can go over to the Patreon and join for $5 a month, gets you the regular subscription. $10 a month gets you the premium, where you get the entire archive. You get one episode per regular episode, and it's all ad free, as well as all the interviews and bonus content. So hope you enjoyed that. Take care of yourselves and be well.